guys, Cavin Elizabeth here, a bridal boutique owner and photographer based in San Diego. In today's video, I am going to be talking about who traditionally pays for what when it comes to wedding expenses and why you can totally break traditions and all things related to wedding expenses. So, you guys know if you've been watching a lot of my videos that I am all about breaking traditions, but sometimes it can be helpful to know what is typically done so that you have a baseline and then you can break the rules if needed. So, I wanted to talk about today who typically pays for what when it comes to weddings, or at least who historically pays for what when it comes to weddings. Now, a lot of this is based on heterosexual couples, so bride and groom. So a lot of this gets really confusing when you have like a bride and a bride or a groom, or whatever you identify as if you are not a typical like bride and groom type couple. So if that is like the case for you, then these rules are already kind of up in the air to begin with. But I know that in a lot of these situations, things might become really confusing. Say, if you are like the bride and the groom and the bride's family might typically pay for something, but maybe the bride's family is not very well off and they're struggling financially, but the groom's family is super loaded, so maybe they pay for these things instead. Or maybe the bride's family is well off, but they don't want to pay for the bride's wedding for whatever reason. Maybe they're not in a good relationship with the bride, or maybe they're just really stingy and they don't want to pay. Or maybe the bride doesn't want her family to pay because there's going to be strings attached, or they're really controlling. Or maybe the bride just wants to be really independent and wants to pay for the wedding herself. There's so many reasons that you might want to break the traditional mold, or the traditional mold might be broken for you because the person who might typically be paying for the wedding can't or doesn't want to. So there are a lot of reasons why all of the traditional people who are paying for the wedding might not be able to pay for the wedding, or they don't want to. So I'm going to tell you guys who traditionally would pay, but just know that this doesn't have to be the way that it's going to work out for your wedding. It might not apply at all, or it might apply in some ways. So you definitely don't have to do it this way, and don't feel bad if it can't work out this way for whatever reason. This is a complicated thing for a lot of people. So a lot of people don't have like the traditional family. Maybe there's divorces, maybe there's family drama, maybe there's financial issues in certain types of the family, or maybe the groom's family really wants to pay and the bride's family like doesn't want to pay, or maybe they're fighting about who gets to pay. There could be like 1,000 different reasons why this traditional stuff that I'm about to tell you guys doesn't work. So if it doesn't work for you, that is totally fine. But if you're here to just know what traditionally happens and you want to get a baseline for where to start and then you can break off from there, then definitely keep watching. All right, so back in the day, like way back in the day, it was typically the bride's family that paid for everything. But more in modern-ish days, like let's say maybe in the past like decade or two, it became the bride's family who would typically start to pay for like the wedding day expenses, and maybe the groom's family would pay for a couple other things. So let's go ahead and jump into what the bride's family would typically pay for. So that would normally be something like the engagement party. So that would simply be like the first kind of wedding event that you're starting out with. A lot of people don't have engagement parties, so if you're not sure what that is, it would be like the couple just got announced and then the parents of the bride are typically throwing an engagement party. So they're inviting friends like, hey, my daughter is engaged and we're throwing a party just to tell people she's engaged. I did not have one of those parties. It wouldn't make sense. My parents don't live anywhere near me and we just didn't have one. So not everybody has one. Don't feel bad if you're not having one, or if you can't afford to have one, your parents can't afford to throw you one. It's not a big deal. Not everybody has one of these. So it's not a huge deal if you're not having one. But traditionally, the bride's parents would be paying for this. If you have somebody else who wants to throw you an engagement party and they're going to pay for it because they're the host, then by all means, they'll be paying for it. But traditionally, the bride's parents would be throwing an engagement party and they would be the ones paying for it. Now, when it comes to things like bridal showers or maybe like a luncheon or something like that, it is usually the person who offers to throw it that is paying for it. Now, if that doesn't sit right with you and you want to provide the funding for it, by all means do that. If you don't feel right about the person who's hosting it, especially if you've asked them to host it, then by all means, provide the funding for it. Be like, hey, here's my budget. Go crazy within the budget and just please host it. I would love for you to host it if that's something you're cool with. You can absolutely do that. There's no rule that says that the person who's hosting the shower has to pay for it, especially if you asked them. Now, if they have just come up to you and offered to host you a bridal shower, then by all means, that is on them. They're the ones offering to host it. It would be weird if they're like, hey, I would love to throw you a bridal shower. Let me throw you a shower, but then I want you to pay for it. That's a little bit weird. Then you would, in that case, maybe be like, hey, I don't really want a bridal shower. I don't want to pay for that. So that would be an interesting scenario. And in that case, if it were me, I'd be like, hey, I don't really want this shower. Like, I don't want to pay for it. But if you're offering to throw somebody a shower, then that kind of implies that you're wanting to throw it, host it, and pay for it. So moving on to the wedding day itself, traditionally the bride's family is the one paying for the wedding expenses. There might be things like bridesmaids' dresses where maybe the bridesmaids are paying for them themselves. That's sort of something that you have to decide if you want to pay for bridesmaids' dresses or you want to have them pay for it. There's a lot of complexities in something specific like that, where maybe you're asking them to buy a specific dress, and if they can afford it or not, you're going to have to figure that out. I could probably do an entire video just on that, but you really need to know your bridesmaids, and if some of your bridesmaids might not be able to afford a specific dress that you've picked out, then that is a really, really sensitive situation that you are going to have to navigate, where maybe you need to pay for that dress, or you need to leave it up to bridesmaids to choose their own dress within a specific color palette, so that they can choose a dress that is affordable for them. So that's a whole other video that I can make, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But again, back to the wedding expenses, the bride's family traditionally will be paying for the wedding expenses. So like the ceremony stuff, the reception decor, all things related to the wedding. Now, for things like hotel stays, typically people are responsible for paying for their own hotel room. So like the groom should be paying for his own hotel room, groom's family paying for their own hotel room. Everybody's kind of like all for themselves when it comes to something like that. So I would not expect that to be a covered wedding expense by the bride's family. So that really needs to be something that everybody themselves is taken care of. If you have a super generous family and you're the bride and they want to pay for people's hotel rooms, that's super generous and that's amazing, but that shouldn't be something that's considered to be paid for, and I don't think anybody expects that the bride's family would be paying for their hotel room. So moving on to the rehearsal dinner, which actually comes before the wedding, so I probably should have done this before the wedding night. That is traditionally something that the groom's family would be paying for. So the rehearsal dinner, the alcohol, the food, all things related to the rehearsal dinner, traditionally that's something that the groom's family would be paying for. If you are not like a bride-groom couple, then you can talk amongst yourselves like who would be paying for what. So if you're a bride and a bride or a groom and a groom, you can kind of figure out who would be paying for what. Maybe you split the wedding costs 50-50, or maybe you decide one family is going to be paying for one night, the other family is going to be paying for the other night. I don't know. It's a really sensitive situation if maybe one family is a little bit more well off than the other, or maybe both families decide I can put up this much money, I can put up this much money, and then it all just goes into the wedding pot, and then you as the couple just decide where that money goes. That might be a better way of doing it, so that both families just put in however much they're comfortable, and then you guys as the couple just decide, and then neither family knows how much the other family put in, so that it's just kind of kept confidential. That might be a really good way to go about it, because then no feelings are hurt, and it's a little bit more like equal in terms of proportions of what each family is comfortable spending. So you might want to go about it that way, and then you as the couple can fill in yourselves from your own pockets of what needs to be kind of filled in the gaps that were left behind of whatever the families couldn't cover. You guys can fill in as needed. Going back to like heterosexual couples, the rehearsal dinner would typically traditionally be paid for by the groom's family. If you guys are having something like a day after brunch, that might typically be paid for by the bride's family. That wasn't really something that I was able to research too in depth. That's kind of up in the air. You could decide that could be more like a groom's family type thing, or it could be paid for by the couple. It's kind of an extension. I feel like if the bride's family is paying for the big wedding day, which is such a huge expense compared to the rehearsal dinner, then maybe the groom's family can pick up the brunch as well, or maybe just the couple because it's a smaller day, maybe less people, definitely not a huge event, and something that you're going to be spending too much money on. Now, in terms of gifts for bridesmaids, groomsmen, your bridal party, typically it is the bride or the groom paying for those and not really the parent. So if you are a bride gifting your bridesmaids gifts, it's going to be you paying for that. I don't know, maybe if your parents want to pay for that, that's cool, that's great, but it's typically going to be the bride paying for the bridesmaids gifts, and then the groom is going to be paying for the groomsmen's gifts. And then on to something like the honeymoon, that is traditionally paid for by the groom, or maybe just in modern days by the couple themselves, but in traditional times it is the groom paying for the honeymoon. So that's pretty much it. Those are all the traditional things. Again, you've got to decide as a couple what is right for you. Maybe if you don't have any living parents, maybe you have grandparents who want to contribute or close aunts and uncles. I wouldn't necessarily ask people to contribute. Maybe people are going to offer, but if you don't have any parents, I am so very sorry for that situation. Then it will come to fall all on your shoulders. You just have to make sure that you are contributing whatever is wise for you. Please do not go into debt over a wedding. If you are worried about spending too much, try to cut your guest list if possible, or just make sure that your budget really reflects your priorities. If you don't care about having a big band, get a DJ instead. If you don't care about decor, then really minimize or slash all decor. If your biggest priority is photography, go big on photography and go small on everything else. If you want to have a little backyard wedding instead of getting a really grand venue, do that. There's always things that you can do to prioritize your budget to make sure that it aligns with your priorities and your biggest hopes and dreams. So you can have like a really huge high budget wedding, or you can have a really small budget wedding. Just make sure that you are spending where your priorities lie, and whoever is paying for the wedding is contributing what they would like to contribute. So to talk about my wedding, what we did was my parents paid for the wedding day itself, and then it was really gracious of them. And then I actually did a lot of trade shoots. So I did a lot of photography for different vendors to do partial or full trades for a lot of their services. So I traded a lot of photography for a lot of the things that were on my wedding day. So some things I got full trades on, and then some things I got partial trades on, which is really great. I had that advantage of being a photographer, so I got a lot of things like not for free, but for trades. So I did a lot of labor in exchange for their labor for my wedding day. And then my fiance's parents gave us a lump sum that we applied to the rehearsal dinner and the honeymoon. So that's the way they did it. They just said, here's what we can contribute, and then you just apply it as needed. So that is what they were comfortable doing, and then we used it on the rehearsal dinner and honeymoon. So everybody's family is going to be different for what they can contribute and what they would like to do. If you are in a situation where you don't want to accept money from your parents for whatever reason, then you are going to be the ones paying for it. And again, just budget wisely, do what you can afford, and do it smart. So I hope that this video is helpful for you guys. Again, rules are meant to be broken, so don't feel like you have to follow tradition. And if you can't go during the traditional times of things, then don't feel bad. Not everybody does the tradition, but this was just to give you guys an idea of what has been done so that you know your baseline, and you can of course deviate from that. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!